Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Inntrospection, the podcast about navigating from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner-Lesser, your host, and I thought it would be good, since it's been a while, to remind you who I am, other than my name. So I've lived through over 30 personal human losses, meaning deaths of family members and friends. It does not include the special pets that I've lost or the experiences that are lost. But they're the kind that crack you open wide and they make you question everything about your life. I never planned to become a grief coach, but after becoming a widow, a single parent, and a solopreneur overnight, just 24 hours before my 43rd birthday, I knew I had two choices: to stay shattered or to turn my pain into purpose. I chose the latter. And over the next few years, I added certified grief and life transitions coach, Reiki master, to my 40 plus years as a social worker, and transformed my own experiences into my life's purpose. I've taken my loss experiences and turned them into spaces for sharing connection, education, meaning, and healing through this podcast, 3 co-authored international best-selling books, and a weekly e-newsletter filled with honest and heart-centered reflections. Not bad for an introvert who wrote extra papers in college just to avoid speaking in front of a class. Now I love it. So today I want to explore a question that comes up often for me, but something that most of us don't say out loud. And that is, why do we avoid talking about death and loss? Why do we shy away when someone mentions grief? Why do we get tongue-tied, change the subject, or even pretend that everything is fine, like nothing ever happened? If you've ever noticed that people don't know what to say when you're grieving, or maybe you've caught yourself avoiding the topic with someone else, you're not alone. So let's peel back the layers on this avoidance. And I promise you, there's no blame, there's no shame, no judgment. It's about understanding so we can start shifting the way we connect with each other in times of loss. There are only two experiences that every human being goes through and that we can share with each other. First one is birth, and most of us know nothing about our birth except by what people have told us. And the other is death. So we have to get better about normalizing death so that it gets easier. So, first thing is cultural silence. Let's start with the big picture. In our culture, death has become something that's been hidden away. 100 years ago, maybe even less, death was part of our life experiences. Families cared for their dying at home, often having the dead laid out in their parlors, and wakes and viewings at home too. Children were present, neighbors gathered to mourn, grief was shared openly, and the rituals gave people permission to talk about it. I remember when my grandfather died, I was not quite 6, and I wasn't even told initially that he had passed away. And I certainly was not allowed to go to the funeral. I found out that he died from a friend because I went to her house when my parents and my grandmother was at the funeral. That was really bizarre. So fast forward to today, most people die in hospitals. Funeral homes take over very quickly. Mourning rituals are shorter and often very private. Nowadays, people might get 3 days off from work and then be expected to return and function as if nothing happened. So basically, we live in a culture where death is invisible. And because of that, most of us grow up without a language, without words for grief. We're not taught how to talk about it. We're not taught how to sit with somebody who's grieving. Silence becomes the default, or maybe even worse. We feel awkward and sometimes say something strange, uneducated, or just, I don't know, bizarre. We're afraid of our own mortality. Here's another truth. When someone else talks about loss, it shines a light on our own fears. It's like a flashlight. Think about it. If your friend loses a partner or a child or even a pet, you may feel a wave of sadness. But there's also a whisper in the back of your mind. That could happen to me, to my partner, to my child, to my parents. It's scary. And often we push away that fear by pushing away the conversation itself. So when someone grieving tries to share, others sometimes go silent, not because they don't care, but because the reality of our mortality feels too close. There's a pressure in our society to stay positive. Everything is positive. We're told, look on the bright side, keep your chin up, stay strong, don't cry. But grief doesn't fit into that mold. Grief is messy, it's unpredictable, it can't be packaged neatly into a motivational quote. So when somebody brings up their own loss, people often respond with things like, everything happens for a reason, or they're in a better place. Really? How do we know? The phrases are meant to comfort, but really they're a way of smoothing over our own discomfort, a way of moving quickly past the pain that we're feeling, not that the griever is feeling, instead of sitting with it. And the grieving person, they're left feeling unseen. Some of it is because we don't want to say the wrong thing. We avoid grief conversations because of fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being judged for what we said. Here's the secret. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the perfect words. In fact, there are no perfect words. What matters most is showing up and saying, I'm so sorry. I'm here for you. Or even just sitting in silence with someone. That's often the best thing. Hold their hand and just listen. If you have a story, a memory to share of a person who's passed, share it. That would be great. But because we're not taught, we default to avoidance. We think it's better to say nothing than to risk hurting them. The irony, of course, is the silence usually hurts more than clumsy words. You may have heard me mention this story before, and it was not done to hurt me. It was my mother on my late husband's birthday, years after he died. Never mentioned him. Never said, oh, I realized today was Steve's birthday. Um, I think about him occasionally. Instead, she just avoided mentioning his name. And I finally said, Mom, you realize that today would have been Steve's birthday. How come you haven't said anything? You haven't acknowledged him. And she said, I didn't want to bring up something that would make you sad. And I remember thinking, really? Mom, did you think that by you not saying his name or mentioning that he existed, that I wouldn't have been thinking about him all day? No, I'm thinking about him probably every day, but especially on his birthday. Without you saying something to acknowledge that he existed, it hurt more than you saying the wrong thing. because it made me feel as if maybe my years of being married, my relationship was all a dream, that I'm the only one who remembered it. Just something to think about. There's also the myth of closure. And it's this idea that grief should have an ending, that at some point there's a law, you're supposed to move on. Well, not true. Not true at all. Grief never ends. It does change, but it never ends. And just when you think it's not going to show up because you haven't felt it for a while, boom, it pops up. So when someone continues to talk about their loss years later, other people may feel uncomfortable. They might even think, shouldn't they be over this by now? No, there are no rules when it comes to grief. It doesn't have a finish line. And as I said, it changes. It softens over time, but it doesn't disappear. Talking about a loved one decades later isn't a sign of being stuck. It's a sign of love. When we believe closure as an endpoint, we cut off opportunities to continue to connect with the person who is grieving. So let's move forward together. We don't move on because when we loved a person or an experience or an animal, the love doesn't go away. Only the physical body of the person went away. Not everyone will agree with me, but I believe that we are all energy. Everything in this universe is energy, and energy doesn't disappear. So while we don't have a body anymore for the energy to be held in, our spirit still exists, our souls. And I believe our souls stay with the people that we love. So let's put it together and move forward and start talking about death. Let's change our culture that hides death. Let's not be afraid of our own mortality. Let's not bow to the pressure to stay positive all the time. There are things that are not positive. They can be things like moving and leaving all your friends if you're a kid. They could be a divorce. They could be a death. Don't be afraid to say the wrong thing. And we need to change our belief that grief can only last a year and it should end. If we allow grief to be a normal part of life and of our conversations, just like we talk about new babies or new jobs or new homes, imagine a world where instead of silence, we say, tell me about your mom. What do you miss the most about her? Or, I'm here to listen, no matter how many years have passed. And you know what? It's okay to not be okay today. Every day isn't a happy go lucky day. Have your feelings, feel your feelings. Because when we don't allow ourselves to fully feel and express our feelings, they don't get better. By talking about grief openly, we not only support those people who are grieving, we also make peace with our own humanity. So today, I want to leave you with this question. What would it look like in your own life to make space for grief conversations? Maybe it's reaching out to a friend who's lost somebody just to say, I'm thinking of you today. Maybe it's being honest about your own grief instead of hiding it away. Maybe it's simply listening without trying to fix it. We don't need to fix grief. Sometimes just a hug, sometimes a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, a meal, a photograph that you found of the person. We can't take away the pain of death and loss, but we can help relieve some of the loneliness and the sadness by being there for somebody. So thank you for spending the time with me today. If it resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with somebody else who might need it. And if you're looking for a safe space to talk about grief in your own life, you can always join me in my Facebook community or schedule a consult. It's a free chat at the link that we're going to include in the bottom. Thank you for joining me today. Think about how you can start to make grief more acceptable to talk about. Thanks a lot. See you soon. If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner-Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at Amy Lindner-Lesser. Thanks.